Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. And honestly, let's immediately challenge that pervasive cultural anxiety we're all feeling right now surrounding artificial intelligence. Because we are constantly bombarded by this narrative, right? This grandiose idea that AI systems have suddenly woken up with their own creative agency, that they're these independent, brilliant authors just conjuring absolute masterpieces out of thin air. But today, we're going to completely dismantle that marketing hype. We're going to look right past the shiny interfaces and uncover the actual physical, mathematical, and legal realities of what artificial intelligence really is. So, this brings us to a really direct, provocative question that totally captures the anxiety of our modern age. Is AI actually a true creator, or is it merely a deterministic digital scripter reflecting our own culture back at us? You know, when you see an algorithm composing music or generating this stunning photorealistic image, it naturally triggers the fear that human creativity is somehow becoming obsolete. But if we look closely at the actual architecture of computation and the philosophy of language, a completely different story emerges. If we draw on cultural theorist Roland Barthes' concept of the scripter, we start to realize that an AI is really just a vessel. It's incredibly sophisticated for sure, but it's a vessel. It processes massive databases, it mimics and it recombines pre-existing human language. It performs what Barthes would call a pure gesture of inscription, but it never truly creates. It entirely lacks the human act of true origination. Section 1. The AI Creator Myth. Despite those stunning outputs we see on our screens, this machine operates purely on computation. As neuroscientists and philosophers constantly remind us, consciousness is tied directly to our biological substrates, and an AI fundamentally lacks this. It doesn't have an inner self, it doesn't feel joy, it doesn't feel grief, and there's absolutely zero intent to express a thought. It is simply executing a technical methodology that is totally stripped of the human experience. To really grasp this, we can define AI as the ultimate modern-day von Neumann Babelfish. It's essentially a tool purely designed to ingest one form of information, map it to an internal meaning space, and spit it out in a totally new format. It translates an English text prompt into Python code or a sequence of words into an image. But remember, it is blindly translating these formats without truly comprehending a single word of them. It is functioning purely as a sword arm for your intent. You are the creative source. The AI is simply the very fast, very literal translator that completely lacks the capacity to actually get your jokes. Section 2. The Digital Scripter. So, how does an AI actually arrive at its answers? Well, today's systems are built on probabilistic neural networks. They do not operate on guaranteed deterministic rules. Instead, they operate on mathematical probability. An AI is designed to be highly accurate, let's say 95% of the time. But because it's fundamentally probabilistic, it is mathematically guaranteed to occasionally produce unpredictable, emergent failures that absolutely no human explicitly programmed into it. And those failures, they happen because of severe technical limitations. The machine operates purely on mathematical probability and inherently lacks explicit top-down logic. It's bound by rigid BPE tokenization limits, which basically means it breaks concepts down into arbitrary chunks, making it totally unequipped to handle true systematic reasoning like basic math. Plus, it suffers from what researchers call fax machine decay, acting kind of like a lossy zip file that compresses data and then just guesses at the output. Ultimately, it functions as an opaque connectionist black box. It is predicting discrete tokens, totally blind to actual meaning. Section 3. The Semiotic Bridge. Now, if the AI is just a probabilistic black box, how do we actually command it? Well, we're crossing a massive physical divide. On one side, we have our human symbolic cognition. Let's call it OS alpha. It is warm, messy, highly associative, and deeply intuitive, fueled by lived experience. On the flip side, we have the Arithmetic Logic Unit, or the ALU. This is the physical silicon hardware. It is cold, rigid, and relies on absolute deterministic logic gates. Human thought is brilliantly creative, but the silicon is purely mechanical. So how do these two completely alien worlds connect? We cross the bridge in 3 distinct steps. First, human intent initiates the strategy. Second, we use the divine script, which is structured text like JSON or Python, to translate that messy thought. And third, the ALU executes the exact physical logic required. This step-by-step workflow perfectly shows how fluid human imagination literally must be squeezed through a rigid textural bridge just to command the machine. And that gives us the definition of this semiotic bridge. It is strictly formatted text acting as the universal deterministic interface. Text is quite literally the only way to safely compile our associative imagination into the strict laws of physics governing those tiny processors. The machine is just the medium executing the text. You, the human, are always the originating source.
Section 4. Practice and lived experience.
Let's ground this technical discussion in deeply human philosophy to see what true creation actually demands. Philosopher Hannah Arendt championed this brilliant concept of praxis, an active, engaged doing that is completely inseparable from human consciousness and our social existence. Because machines cannot engage in this lived practice, they don't have an inner self, they have no societal context, they have absolutely no internal drive to express themselves. Authentic art requires accumulating diverse emotional experiences. It's about feeling joy, grief, heartbreak, and resilience. As the source material points out, it requires fighting your way through the physical maze of life, that biological friction, that historical sweat of the brow of staring down a blank page. That is the true engine of originality. An algorithm cannot replicate that emotional friction. It hasn't lived. And that friction is exactly why copyright law is reviving the sweat of the brow doctrine. On one side, we have algorithmic distortion, which is machine-driven, unpredictable mathematical guesswork. On the other side, we have human protortion. This is the proactive, sweating, agentic intent of a human mind carefully mapping its vision onto reality with high fidelity. True authorship demands protortion. It demands the continuous steering of a human pilot actively rejecting the random distortion of the algorithm.
Section 5. Liability and agentic tort.
So who is responsible when the machine fails? Tech scholar Madeleine Claire Alish coined a terrifying but honestly brilliant concept called the moral crumple zone. Just like the front of a car is explicitly designed to crush upon impact to save the main cabin, developers are intentionally keeping human operators in the loop of complex AI systems to absorb the legal impact and liability if the software fails. They use you as a shield for systemic algorithmic errors.
Because you stand on the semiotic bridge issuing commands, the absolute unyielding burden of liability falls strictly on you. The realities of agentic tort mean that machines cannot hold legal liability. When you command the AI, you commit an agentic tort. If the system hallucinates bad data or infringes copyright, affirmative defenses will legally blame the human user for failing to intervene. You get the credit for the work, sure, but you also absorb all the cost of the errors.
Section 6. The human orchestrator.
Look, we are evolving from pure origination to becoming the algorithmic orchestrator. You are the sovereign pilot and the ultimate theological steward of the ALU. The AI is merely the deterministic digital scripter, the cold processor of the grid. But we are the spark that ignites the whole system. The magic, the intent, the emotional resonance, that is 100% yours. You provide the rhetoric and the vision, the machine merely provides the technical execution.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to ponder. If the machine is simply a deterministic bridge waiting for instructions, what magnificent, messy, emotional, uniquely human intent will you choose to send across the semiotic bridge today? As we embrace this new agentic era, your role is no longer just generating content, it's architecting actual meaning. The choice and the true magic of authorship is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me, and keep creating.